Nothing on the table. Okay, peace. You feeling good? Yeah.
Teams, 2 minutes to go and 2 minutes we will start the first pilot set. Sagen, die waren aber 20 Schlitten, die wir sehen, also 4 heute schon im Monoblock der Frauen.
Altenberg in Saxony, the final race weekend of the IBSF Bobsleigh and Skeleton World Cup season, and at this tough drivers track, the final run in the two-man competition about to get underway. It's a foggy afternoon, but fortunately the wind has dropped. Welcome back to our coverage from Altenberg, everybody. Martin Haven alongside me, coach Anne van Nieuwenhuis for Belgium and Australia. And Anne, this is such a tough drivers track, isn't it? It's one that everybody kind of respects almost more than anywhere else.
I think they respect it more than anywhere else. It's a busy drivers track. There are a few spots that you really need to hit to collect speed, but also to be safe and to come down safely. Is the beginning to get a good result. You need to finish on four runners, obviously. Long push, long flat, and then it sweeps you into curve 1 and curve 2, where it really goes downhill quickly, and then it throws you into this big 3-4 combination, and this is where you can make or break your speed, because it goes uphill again into 5, and then we have this fast labyrinth kind of curves 7, 8, leading up to a big curve 9, where you need to shoot that straightaway leading up to the big Kreisel, which has a lot of pressure, and we haven't been to big pressure tracks in a while, so really wakes you up again coming from St. Moritz to Altenberg. And then we have this fast 11-12 and 13-14 uphill going into 15, where you cannot make mistakes because it will drop you a couple of tenths, and then into the big left hand 16 and 17 almost looks like one curve, but going uphill there into the last curve, which is actually already after the finish line. So it goes really quickly here.
It really does, doesn't it? And the ice here is always super fast, whatever the weather. Was record speeds in Europe Cup a couple of weeks ago, and we actually had Trek records in all of the skeleton races yesterday. Didn't quite get there this morning. It's a much damper day today, so the ice is just a little bit slower, but no less intimidating. In fact, probably the fog sitting down around us is just giving it that extra little kind of ghostly effect as well. Well, this is a happy hunting ground for Francesco Friedrich. He's been an 8-time winner here in two-man alone, including 2020 and 21 World Championships. Brad Hall's been on the podium. He and Taylor Lawrence were the bronze medalists. There's Big T back in harness again, bronze medalist here last year. But in the last 4 seasons, in fact, victory has gone to Johannes Lochner and Adam Amor. So Friedrich's had a bit of a winless streak here. 2021 World Championships is the last German podium sweep, and that was the first since before the 2008 Worlds. So expect to see the Germans do well here. Of course they're on home ice, but the doors are wide open. And we have a decent field in our draw, 20 two-man sleds, and going off last will be 2 rookies from Switzerland, Kilian Rohn and Andre Thurer, who have stepped up from Europe Cup to replace Mickey Vogt, who's moved down to Europe Cup to harvest some more points.
Exactly.
Race 7, the final run of the IBSF two-man bobsleigh World Cup. We're in Altenberg in Germany, a foggy afternoon. Chris Horn and Hunter Powell get us underway. Martin Haven and Anne van Nieuwenhuis watching the action with you trackside.
So Chris is quite new on this track. And he has a little bit of trouble getting into the sled. You can see that he got in just on the brow of the push, and it took his right foot a little bit of trouble. Also came out of curve 1 with a skid, and you can see the fog hanging into the track.
Very much foggier than the monobob race this morning. Just enough visibility. The straights aren't particularly long.
Yeah, and big waves into curve 4, which helps your dip and which helps your exit, but you really need to nail that second wave then to bring it across the 5.
Hits hard out of 9.
Yeah, but he got it back into a parallel entry into the Kreisel, and he used the waves perfectly, setting him up for a lovely exit. But sharp crossover there, and it throws his sled up in 12. Little too early onto 14. So he's a little squirmish around the track, late into 16, and did a big steer there to control that height.
Freshly spritzed ice, so it'll probably be running a little slicker, a little less grip from the runners than he had found in training.
Especially
training days were
being the
kind
first
of
off.
yeah. Training days were kind of damp like this, and so yeah, the track has definitely been running faster today.
Yeah, and there you can see the load. He was really high, but his right foot didn't quite get in it. He needed to push himself up again to get that right foot to come in, and Hunter waiting there in the back to give his driver space to load. And there we saw that very sharp crossover into 12, and it sweeps you up a little bit too high. Yeah. But considering he doesn't have a lot of experience here, good to get that first one down.
And it's a busy run, isn't it? It never gives you a chance to rest. Next up for Switzerland, Timo Rohner and Mathieu Hersberger. And Rohner needs a big result here this weekend in the 2-man and the 4-man to help the Swiss qualify sleds for the Games.
Unfortunately, he had a crash in training, and his brakeman, Luca Rolli, is not here now. Mathieu is stepping in for Luca, so they need a big push and a good result. Timo has a lot of experience here, so he can put down a really good push and a really good run.
It's such a long start here. It's like a 10K for the brakemen. Just keep going and going and going.
And we saw a beautiful exit out of 2, early into 3. A little bit too early onto 5, but he controlled it there. He's patient in 6 and 7. And And a lovely entrance into 9 and just perfect exit there. And you can see it already in the speed that he built a lot of speed in that upper part of the track. A little too high near the end, but gave him the tap before 11. But a lovely 12 to 13, perfectly early. That helps you with being able to drive a little less. You need to do less with your runners if the track itself is helping you, if the curve itself is already pushing you to the correct position. And a 8,500 advantage over Horn really shows that he has the experience here compared to his American rivals.
Yeah, of course, Chris Horn learned in the junior circuit in North America, so much more experience, Lake Placid, Salt Lake, Whistler, whereas Timo spent years here in Europe Cup, coming to Altenberg every season.
And there we can see those big waves in 4. It helps you to get that dip a little bit earlier, so you can troll that second wave early enough, and you would be able to create the pressure to shoot through there. He didn't quite nail it. It was too early on, and then you can see the sleds get pushed away, and it gets the height a little bit too late in 5. It can really cascade on, especially this morning in monobobs. You could see if you make a little mistake there that it cascades on into 5 and 6 and 7.
Next up for the Netherlands, Dave Wesselink and Jelen Francic. Enormous emotions in St. Moritz, in the sled that they borrowed from Sarah Blizzard. Here it is again. They managed to do enough to fulfill their National Olympic Committee's obligations and secure themselves the chance to go to the Games.
Yeah, in the 2-man they're already qualified. In the 4-man they still need to wait on the decision. And a little bit of a tricky load there for Jelen, 5:29, just slower than the Americans. Dave also doesn't have a lot of experience on this track yet. He spent a little bit of time here last season in EC and in Junior Worlds, but definitely nailed the exit there out of curve 4. A bit high in 6, and that gives him the tap before 7. Let's make sure that he gets it back under control here, but high on the exit of 9. One big skid going into the Kreisel. Really likes the speed, very flat Kreisel there, and then gets the pressure near the end. He also had a training mishap in the 4-man here in curve 12, late into 14. Little bit of a drift there. High in 16, needed to control that, but gets it over the finish line, 56:21. He'll be happy to get that one down, because that spill in training in the 4-man really damaged his knees, and being able to push a 5:29 with such a painful injury must be very difficult.
To be 100 behind Chris Horn at the start is pretty impressive. Horn's a big starter with Hunter Powell behind him.
Well, so are Dave and Jelen, so good job on them. And you can see there was almost a forward pressure created at the end of Kreisel, and then here as well, came out of 9 a little bit too soon, and then it picks you up at the very end. It creates a second wave, and you can see Jelen is proud of his driver to bring him down.
Yep.
One more.
One more in the regular season. It's ending so early because of the qualification for the Games. Next up, Marcus Treichel. There is Saros behind him in the 2-man. There you can see the inside of the sled. A little crescent, the black crescent just by the driver. That's a tiny little seat back.
Yep.
That sort of just about basically you put your backside and then press against foot pegs to hold yourself in. There are no seats, there are no seat belts.
Good timing on that hit, and you can see the drivers really try to run it far. They need to run it over the crest to get that velocity into curve 1. Third fastest start time, but second velocity, so great job there.
And Treichel, hugely experienced. He's been on this track a decade and more. Little skid there from 3 to 4.
But got it back under control. And really nice 4 to 5. Just really trying to let it flow in this middle part, and then create the height in 9 at the good time, so you can really drop out and collect all of that speed.
This is his 15th season driving bobsleds. Big late height in the Kreisel, but brought it down nicely.
Also a little bit late entry into 11, which means he had to do more steering than with an early entry. All of these little things sometimes add up to not having the same velocity, not having that fast downtime that you were looking for.
200s in front across the line, 55.86 leads from Timo Röner by just that tiny margin.
And I think that skid, that slide off of curve 3, between 3 and 4, really cost him a lot of speed. If you make these mistakes at the top of the track, you pay for it at the bottom.
Yeah, you can't undo the error. There's not enough ice to make up ground.
Nice load, getting his push bar in, getting down and settled. And here we see the 11-12 crossover, where he also just has a little bit of sideways sliding off there. You want to make that transition as long and smooth as possible.
All right, next up, friends and family of Frank Del Duca and Boone Niederhofer. So Frank having a really strong season in the two-man, lots of top 6 finishes, struggling with the 4-man, but starting to bring that into focus a little bit more. There's no question he can drive. He's just not found that rhythm with the 4-man.
Well, he's changing the momentum in the 4-man. You could see that in the last couple of races, so let's hope he can carry that into Altenberg weekend as well. And a 5:34 matches the push-off tricycle with Saris. And really kept it low around the bottom of curve 2 to create the pressure in that straightaway. He's not waving as much, keeps it more controlled, but definitely had a good exit out of 4. A bit too early onto 7. But a nice entry into curve 9. Hangs it off there, just flops out of it. And you can see fastest speeds, these American sleds, they are really fast. If you can get them to point down the middle of the track, they can really accelerate.
USA have not had a two-man medal here in over 18 years. It's been a long while waiting. 2 tenths up on Marcus Treichel. This could well be a top half-dozen run by the end of it.
A very good run by Frankie. 55-58. 3 tenths ahead, almost 3 tenths ahead of Marcus Treichel. That gives him a really good position here in the two-man, I think.
That really should put him in there shouting, shouldn't it? Worst result of the season in the two-man last week in St. Moritz, a mere 7th position.
And then that's very, very, very high scoring if you can get an average of 7th position.
Yeah, it's all been 4ths and 5ths. Hasn't had a medal yet, but 7th was his worst.
He controlled that first wave, kept it kind of flat, but then allowed the sled to wave in the second and the third one, which helps you build the speed in Kreisel, actually. So if you can time those waves perfect, it gives you more velocity. Flattening it out, it makes it slower.
Okay, for Italy, Patrick Baumgartner, Jose Abu on the back of the sled. Now, obviously the teams are rotating brakemen around, trying to keep everybody fit, but trying to keep everybody race sharp as well. But then when you've got a long track like this, that's a marathon start, you want somebody who's got big top-end speed, as much as explosive power off the block.
You want a sprinter in Altenberg. Yeah. And Mircea, his usual two-man brakeman, is very strong. He's a weightlifter, so he's very explosive. But on this runner's push track, it's sometimes better to get a sprinter in there. With a 5:42, they started.
So 5th best start. He is our 6th sled down.
And here you could really see that he used those waves, he used those oscillations to manage that exit out of 4 perfectly. And this is such a vital part of the track to get a good downtime.
Smooth, quiet run from Chudai down to the Kreisel. Best speed.
Absolutely. And here you can see those oscillations as well. Perfect early entries into 11, so it allows him to not having to steer too much. Bit late there, so he's high up in 14 and dives out a little too soon, giving him that left pressure. And then he's a bit high up there as well, so he's trying to let the sled fly, not steer too much. 56.01.
All right, 800s back at the start, 4300s back at the bottom. It wasn't as good as it looked, and maybe that clean line was the result of just doing too much work on the D-rings.
Or maybe he chose a little bit of a safer setup, or maybe we have a lot of fog already sticking onto the track.
And again, you know, the safer setup thing. Altenberg has that reputation, and he's going to his home Olympics. Does a top 10 here matter? Not as much as it will do in February.
The only thing it will affect is his start draw or his start number in Cortina. So that's why he's here, why he wants to stay in that mix to have a good start in the Milan-Cortina.
At the moment, he's in 9th in the IBSF rankings, or the World Cup rankings for two-man, so he should get a decent start draw. Next up, Mihai Tenter, Georg Jordash behind him as well. It's been a while since Georg has been on the back of the two-man sled, and again, you suspect for the same reason, that high-speed acceleration. Mihai will get in early.
Nice smooth load. And you can see some of these sleds out of the start group are already drifting really to the left. They are pushed very early onto curve 1, which makes curve 1 hard to drive. Ideally, you want to get the early height there, but he managed it well. But we might see some skids out of curve 1. Looking smooth so far. Nice height in 9, and then you're able to shoot it out in the middle. He drifts it over to an early entry into Kreisel, flattens out the waves a little bit more, and that's
Carries the speed.
still good velocity there.
Top speed into and out of the Kreisel.
Great job coming out of 14 as well. That uphill sticking on the right side of the straightaway.
Is he going to lead? No. 2/10
Well,
back, but
top velocity, very pleased with
7th
that.
at the start, 2nd at the bottom.
And
That's
we
a
know
really
he
good
can
drive.
Yeah.
And this is a place like Sigulda that really brings out that ability to change direction in the sled without bleeding time. That's something very different. Gliding in St. Moritz is a whole world away from
It's a
this.
completely different track than last week. Here it really is a driver's track. You need to nail the pressures. As for Moritz, it's more about letting it flow. But he did a really good job here. Here, as I told you, you can see him drift out of those grooves a little bit to the left side. So drivers really need to get their hands on the D-rings before they head on into that curve so they can attack it and get the early height.
Bronze medalist last year here, bronze medalist last week in two-man in St. Moritz. Brad Hall with Taylor Lawrence, Big T, back in the team. He had injuries that kicked him out of the squad pretty much all season long. But he is kind of a talisman for this crew.
He really is a big, strong push athlete, and he's been Brad's lucky charm. They work really well together, and you can see it in their results. 5:29, strong push of both of them. And there, that little skid, the back end just slid off of curve 1. Let's hope it didn't cost him too much velocity. And then high oscillations. Brings him a little bit too early onto 5, but it's just a slight touch. It didn't push his sled away, but it's just those little things that might rob you of some speed.
These tiny late flops, comes nicely out of 9, straight down the left-hand side as the driver sees it to
And
Kreisel.
very high speed.
Yeah, really good. 1:16.2, 72 miles an hour, highest speed we've
And
seen.
he really accelerated out of Kreisel, could build on that speed, almost came 1 kilometer per hour faster out of Kreisel than he went in there, so it shows that it was really working for him.
Building his advantage over Frank Del Duca, but at the line, it's just 0.05 of a second. That's the difference between them at the start. Remains the difference between them at the bottom.
And without that little skid out of curve 1, it might have been a bigger difference, but he did an excellent job.
Again, that 4-5 transition, 7-8 little taps, but the Kreisel went well.
Yep, really used the height, pinged it up just before the red flag is where you want to be high, so you can shoot it out. And there, that 11-12 might have been a little bit too high, and that good velocity that he had out of Kreisel just got a little bit taken off there.
All right, is this the last two-man race of Francesco Frigid's career on his home track? He won't say yes, he won't say no. 4 years ago into Beijing, he said 4 more years, but he's 35. He is still at the top of his game. He is at home. He hasn't won for 4 seasons. Is it time?
Oh, and he's eager to get a big push, running it really deep. Great efficient load, 5:21.
Wow.
In these conditions. Oh, and you see the drift and a lot of correction there, getting it to settle.
Well, he'll be chasing start records in 4-man tomorrow when it's due to be sunny.
Wow, and a beautiful curve 4 to 5. Textbook how you should do it. And obviously, he's the local driver. He knows all of it.
But 800s over Brad Hall at the start, down to 400s, down to 200s.
And
not as
way
good
lower
speed.
velocity. Is he overdriving it to get there, or has the skid out of curve 1 cost him too much?
100th is the lead over Brad Hall. Frank Del
Still
Duca.
slower.
Del Duca's 500s back. He might be third at the line.
Ooh, very high there. Taps on the inside wall between 15 and 16.
Little wave at the end of 16. 400s in it.
Wow.
Well, the 4-time Olympic champion, double reigning 2-man, double reigning 4-man champion, is still one of the hot favourites. You're not going to make money betting on Friedrich in the games.
And there you can see he didn't have the height. It picked him up at the very end, threw his sled out to the right side, and he had to do a lot of correction to get it to settle. And then here, came into 15 late, which throws him up. He didn't want to steer too much, so he just let it happen, took the tap, and then got it back in 16.
Taps do less damage than skids, don't they? But drivers so often drive to avoid the hit and then skid. All right, so Friedrich leads by a whisker from Hall and Del Duca. And now, Adam Amor, winner here 2 years ago, ahead of Francesco. And Kim Jin-soo was the bronze medalist then. So Adam Amor, hot off a really big weekend last weekend in St. Moritz, where he won the 4-man gold, his first 4-man win.
Also running it very deep. Let's make sure that he has his... and you can see that little drift. Tried to get it back to an early entry. Also tiny skid. And you can see if that back end of the sled is still in curve 1, it just slides off and puts you into that skid. And that's the risk when you're running it deep and you're doing a big push, that you don't have control in the beginning.
And this might be the last race for his brakeman, Benedikt Hertel. Benny's not going to the games, so this will certainly be his final World Cup race of this season.
Also a little bit of a flatter Kreisel. Swings high onto 12, late entry into 13 and 14. But he really built speed on there. German FES sleds, they're flying if you get them in the middle.
Holy
Wow,
moly!
129.2.
That's astonishing. 900s behind at the start to 3/10 ahead of Francesco Friedrich on Friedrich's home track.
And the top speed really made a difference. So much faster than any other sled we've seen at the bottom part of the track. You can see switching his hands, kicking his feet forward, trying to load in one motion, and then getting the hands in, push the lever for the push bar, and then big steer to flatten out that first wave.
And this is the classic German line, isn't it? That flat, constant Kreisel.
The Germans like to use the waves, but they want it to be parallel. So if your sled is pointing up and down, it's also creating too much distance. It's that happy middle between making it completely flat and controlling those waves. So if you can get it to rise and dip parallel.
Yeah, too much or not enough. And it's in between the two. All right, so 10 down. Adam Amor, the surprise first heat leader. Next up, Kim Jin-soo and Kim Jong-gyun behind him.
And they'll be eager for a big push as well. Wow, he really ran it out of the start grooves, 520.
And you saw how far Kim Jong-gyun was running.
He went for it. He almost ran it into curve 1.
He is such a long-legged sprinter. He really was nearly in turn 1. And that advantage, he's still carrying almost all of it over Adam Amor, the fastest man down so far.
Yep, wasn't entirely perfect in 3-4, but he managed really well. He has decent speed going into Kreisel, just a whisker slower than the German sled.
These two were bronze medalists here 2 seasons ago.
Skids out of 12 because he had that high crossover. So he's on, skidding into 15 as well. Sharp exit there.
He might still be ahead of Francesco Friedrich. Is he second at the line? He is second at the line. 200s ahead of Friedrich.
And it just got away from him a little bit after Kreisel. Was a bit too high in 11. And then from 12 onwards, it was just a little bit unstable. But up until that point, really great job with that push and carrying that velocity down the track.
What a season he has had, Kim.
He doesn't look too... He knows he made those little mistakes at the bottom and it cost him speed.
Started off with 4th in the opener in Cortina, and they were absolutely astonished by that, but they've had such a strong year.
And there you can see 11 to 12, sharp on there. He needs to catch it and like steer more than he should or want. And then there, the exit out of 14 gave him left hand pressure, and you hit on that upside, like on that uphill part, it costs you a little bit too much time and speed.
All right, next for Latvia, Jēkabs Kalenda and Edgars Ungas, veteran brakeman behind the 23-year-old driver. And one of the most impressive things I always think about the Latvians is how healthy they remain. Guys like Mats Miknes, nearly 15 years into his career, barely missed a race.
They have a big change of staff, and they also have a new physical coach this season. So I think that's been a big part of keeping the guys healthy, keeping them fit, keeping everyone into race shape. But a 5:37, I think they'll be a little bit disappointed with that, knowing they're strong pushers
normally.
Little
pack in training. He didn't really have any standout runs. I think it must be so similar in feel to Sigulda, where they come from, that you would expect the Latvians to do what, and they have in the past.
They definitely have. He is currently outdriving his start and definitely building speed on there. Just dropped a little speed in the Kreisel though. Bit sharp between 13 and 14, but a good exit. Going to that right side, collects the pressure to keep you on the right side between 15 and 16.
Kind of where he was in training. I mean, similar conditions, but yeah.
And there you could see the new coaching staff, Emil Stikulis, who took over as head coach, and Erik Franke, who used to be a pusher for the German team, who is their physical coach, who is keeping them in top shape.
Last Latvian medal was in the 2020 Worlds, bronze for Oskars Kibermanis. That was his 4th consecutive bronze medal in two-man here.
And here you can see he just did a lot of driving. Pinged up at the right time, just before the flag. And then, as so many sleds, we've seen that little jump. So if you cross over too sharply, it sometimes lifts up the back runners. And knowing this sled is about 390 kilos, that's a lot of force, a lot of velocity being lost there, kicking up that sled.
Well, here is the man of the season in two-man and four-man, our World Cup points leader in both disciplines. Johannes Lochner, 5 wins from the 6 races this season. Only in race 1 in Sigulda did Francesco Friedrich finish ahead of him, and he took the silver. I mean, if you're looking for a man in form, if you're thinking you're going to get short odds on Friedrich, they'll be even shorter probably on Lochner.
Wow, 19.519 even outstarts the Koreans. Fastest start, fastest velocity. He really had to make sure he had his hands on the D-rings because he ran it out of the grooves almost.
And Hansi has perfected the art of doing little to nothing in the sled. And this is the skill, isn't it? Guiding it at exactly the right time so the sled and the energy do all the work.
This is a track where it needs a little bit more guidance than usual, than most tracks, but he's very good at minimalizing what he's doing. He's a perfect oscillations there.
Whisker up on a more into the Kreisel, but behind him in terms of speed, so the gap's coming back down, 1600s.
Great exit there. Nice and middle.
Going to be very close at the bottom. 100th or 2, 1100s. He held it together, didn't he, down below corner 12.
And considering their start difference, it's impressive what Amor did in the drive.
Yeah, 1100s back at the start, Adam Amor. 1100s back at the bottom. So he actually outdrove Hansi for that run. Hansi didn't quite get his hands on the handle there, using that power start off the back block.
And there you can see Those elbows in, all of the energy going forward, making big strides, high knees up to get that velocity.
I tell you,
there,
whatever.
that skid out of curve 1.
And that's probably worth a 10th by the bottom of the track, just that couple of hundreds that he loses there.
At least.
Georg Fleischauer has said he will continue next season. Even, Hansi almost certainly won't, but Georg, yeah, I'm going again. He's discovered a new lease of life in bobsledding and does not want to let it go. For Switzerland, Cedric Follador and Omar Fergeler. Again, Follador experienced enough on this track to be able to produce a top 10 run. It's pretty much where he was in training.
Yeah, Penny's known as a very stable driver, a very good driver who finds speed in the track. A 540 push.
1900s behind Lochner from the start, and that should multiply by a factor of nearly 3 to the bottom.
A little touch there, going uphill into 5. And also a bit early onto 7. Jumped into 8. And a little long on 9, but he drops it off and he keeps it in the middle. You can see him wiggle it over to have an early entry into Kreisel. The later you enter into Kreisel, the more driving it requires, that first wave. So all of the pilots usually want to be as early as possible.
Timing's better at the bottom of the track than it was before the Kreisel.
Nice, smooth transition, 16 to 17. And he's right in the mix there.
Yeah.
100 ahead of his teammate Timo Rohner, 100 behind Markus Streichel.
So it's super tight. 11th fastest start, drives himself up into 9th at the bottom. And this is so often the case, you know, from about 6th to 19th, there tends to be barely more than a 100th or 2 between any of the sleds.
Yeah, these guys really have a very competitive field. There are a few top sleds, and then there's a lot of midfields, which makes for very interesting races.
It really does. So hard to predict. And then, of course, we'll go to Cortina, and it won't be 2 heats, it'll be 4 heats, and who knows what the track will change to, what the weather will do overnight, you know. It's basically a whole new reset. For France, Romain Heinrich and Dorian Hauteville, the dads in the team. And, of course, the story, we told a number of times, Romain retired after Beijing, and then when it was announced that the games were going to the French Alps for 2030, sliding would be on his home track in La Plaine. Suddenly he's unretired again.
Yeah, must be a special feeling to have home games, so makes sense that he would come back for that. 5:35.
Yeah.
10 fastest start, but 8 velocity, and also had to wiggle it a little bit out of curve 1. Brings it over to the left just before 3, which helps him with the steer. And you can see that he put it perfectly in the middle between 4 and 5. Just uncertain how much driving it requires to get to this nice lines. And if you can get a good velocity heading into Kreisel, you can see the very active, I want to get it in early. And then middle to 11.
10th at the start. Speed is dropping away a little bit.
Yeah, he starts to bleed some speed. A little unstable in that uphill part. Tried to keep it on that right side, didn't allow it to go in late.
Across the line, 56 dead in 12th place. Not the run that it looked like it might be.
No. Out of that straightaway, and from 9 to 10, he did a little bit too much work, and then it just got away from him a bit.
La Plaine, another busy driver's track, so you sense that this should sort of appeal to him as well. Certainly Margot Bock had good runs in the mono earlier on, his teammate.
Yep, and Margot will be driving the same sled. They share this 2-man. Oh, and there a lot of liftoff, so that's all energy that's going upward instead of forward. And then you can see he decided, I want to go in early, but then it actually touched his nose away. So required him to do a lot of steering. Had a good time, second wave and third wave.
So Romain Heinrich, our 15th starter in a field of 25 sleds to go in the first heat of this final World Cup of the season for 2-man bobsleigh. Jakob Mandelbauer and Daniel Bertzler. And Jakob Mandelbauer looking like he is on the cusp of qualifying to go to Cortina. And for a young driver, that's a massive step in his career.
Exactly. Had an excellent weekend in Maritz. A little bit of trouble there getting into the sled. 5:31.
100th behind Adam Moore. I mean, that is decent starting.
But a little long onto curve 2. It made him drift over to the right, hold it back.
Outstarted Marcus Treichel by 0.03 of a second. They'll be happy with that, especially Daniel Birchler.
And there, good height in 9. Helps him with the exit. Brings it over just too soon and a skid before Kreisel. High oscillations. And then nice early entry, but a sharp crossover, and it costs you a little bit of velocity. Too early onto 14. You could hear that front bumper tap.
He was out driving his start. They were 8th fastest at the start. He was on the left there, 15 to 16. And it is, not quite a top 10 run at the bottom. That was looking like it was going to be 7th, verging on 6th position as he got down to the Kreisel.
So from 7th to 14th, we have currently 23 hundredths in between there. So that middle pack it's basically a one heat.
And it's, I mean, you know, every race, every year, it so is. And that's what you get with elite sport. Look at the height of the sled coming into shot there.
Yep, and that crosses him over, so he needs a lot of control. And you could see the articulation of the sled. And then here, that front bumper touching into 14 and then high into 15, falling out. It tapped him back to 16, luckily, because if you stay on the left side there, it's not pretty. And it's not a very pleasant
crash.
not a very pleasant feeling going into 16 late.
Oh, he had the Friedrich error there, didn't he? So here we go with Taylor Austin. Lucas Stoikos behind him on the sled. And again, I think who they choose for tracks like this probably tells us a little bit about the physiognomy of the brakeman.
Yeah, that and getting brakemen to rotate. If you're already safe in qualification, maybe they want to get everyone, keep them healthy and give everyone else a chance. So we don't know what the thought process is there. 5:47 for Taylor with Luca.
Nice run down to corner 3.
All season his foreman crew has been pushing okay, but the two-man is just not quite there yet. He's known as a good driver that outdrives his start. Also learned the traits of driving in Whistler, which is also a busy driver's track, a fast, busy driver's track. So this must be to his liking.
Sure is. Nice line so far. 17th at the start, picking it up a little.
Looks very controlled. Not doing too much work.
Chasing Dave Vesselink of the Netherlands. Let's see if he can make it 15th at the line. He's not going to be far away. He is 15th at the line.
Just ahead by 0.02 of a second.
Well, that's a lifetime in this. Yeah, 200 ahead of Vesselink. And what is he? He's just about a 10th behind, 2 tenths actually, nearly behind Patrick Baumgartner. So they're having a little tussle of their own, Taylor Austin and Dave Vesselink at the moment.
Yep, but from a 17 start time to a 15 down time. Just a solid, controlled run. The height in 4, it dips, and you control the second wave. Just got onto 5 a little early. That brush that pushes you away a little bit. It picks up the back of the sled.
And like everybody else, trying to make sure that the equipment and the bodies stay in one piece before they leave Altenberg. So next up, Matej Behunek from Czech Republic. Andre Rupp behind him. And these two have done probably half the two-man races together this season.
Yes, and the Czech Republic is very close here. They have a lot of pre-training here usually, so he's very familiar with the track.
He's only made the cut once this season, that was race 1 in Sigulda. And he's probably overdriving just about everywhere else, but in Sigulda, that's a bit of a prerequisite, is that you get a lot of steering done.
Got onto 2 late, so he had late height there, but got it back before curve 3. Just a touch uphill and late into 6, gives him the height and the tap before he heads into 7. Just a little unstable. Taps and skids. Oh, a very long skid in that straightaway to Kreisel.
And that's a shame because his speed wasn't bad. He's the 17th sled down. He had 13th best speed.
Still 14th best speed, so he's keeping it alive. That little drift, pulling him to the right into 15. Nice high line, smooth transition. In 17th position, just 500s behind Wesseling, considering they had a 1400 start deficit with the Dutch. Really drove it close to them.
And 1500 slower than Chris Horn, who's 18th behind him, and Horn is half a second back. So Chris Horn's untidy top of the track.
And there
never
you see that
recovered.
early entry onto 5. It lifts the sled, and then late pressure out of 9. Flops off, takes a tap, tries to get it back. You can see those runners being wiggled to get that drift under control.
All right, 2 to go in the first heat from Liechtenstein. Martin Krantz and David Schöffen. Schöffen back on the 2-man sled. So Krantz really developing fast as a young driver. This small Liechtenstein crew, just enough men for a 4-man.
Yeah. He spent some time here on Europa Cup. He's not with his usual brakeman, but I think they are transitioning back into heading into the games, because I think his usual brakeman doesn't have the nationality of Liechtenstein. Oh, and then the long drift out of curve 1. 5:45 start, but that must have cost him a lot of velocity. Flops it off of 3, and just an early entry into 5. And here an interesting little rattle in the sled. But he nails that straightaway, right in the middle, brings it back to the left side.
Decent speed, always
Very
seems
good
to produce
velocity.
decent speed, yeah.
Their material usually is running quite well, but being at the back of the field doesn't help with the track slowing down.
The Swiss sled technician who'll be chasing that noise for a start.
And
Across the line, 56.41, so just behind, just ahead of Chris Horn, rather. In fact, 3200s ahead of Chris Horn.
I think he'll be a little bit disappointed with that run. They did very well here in Europa Cup, so I think they were aiming to be a little bit higher up the order.
Well, Krantz has made the cut in every race this season. 20th in Cortina to start the year, 18th in Eagles, and then 15th in Winterberg, 17th in St. Moritz.
And you could see there was a lot of sideways velocity, a lot of scrubbing of the eyes, back runners being lifted. So it just cost you a lot of time and speed.
He was kind of chasing the sled all the way down, wasn't he? Didn't feel like he was leading it entirely successfully. And our final starters, Kilian Rohn, not Rona, and Andre Tour from Switzerland. The driver's 23, the brakeman 30. The driver is the more experienced, started in 2019, training for the Youth Olympic Games in 2020 in St. Moritz. Didn't do those. He started instead in Europe Cup in January 2024. And has been racing there ever since. His brakeman has had 5 2-man races.
And they really found each other, because Kilian is a slightly smaller driver and Andre is a very big brakeman. So they found the perfect match for the 2-man. 5:64. A little early onto 5 there in that uphill. Gets it back. Middle
Nice.
entry into 7, into 8. Good
Nice
hide in
lines.
9. Clean exit, just keeps it off the wall. 13 speed out of 20 sleds. A little bit of a flatter line, but manages to come out. Crosses over, nice and controlled. Just looking away from 13, but keeping it in the middle there. And that little drift coming uphill.
He's ahead of Chris Horn. He's chasing Martin Krantz of Liechtenstein for 18th, and he just slips in behind him. A 10th behind Liechtenstein. There you go.
Yeah, with a almost 2:10 start deficit, bringing it back to a 10th off of the Liechtenstein duo.
First ever World Cup, called up at really very short notice. I think you probably knew about a week ago, maybe a little longer, that he was coming to the World Cup in Altenberg. And he makes the cut in his first run.
And there you can see the push. Big Andre in the back. And then here, exit out of Groove 14, going uphill, and then there's just a little bit too much pressure left in the back of the sled, making him skid uphill.
Well, there you go, big smile on his face. First night nerves gone. He's made his first ever World Cup start, and he will not be last after the first run. First after the first run is the three-time winner on this track in the last 4 races, Johannes Lochner. All of those, in fact 2 of those, 3, with Georg Fleischhardt, 1 with Eric Bruckert when we did double races here a couple of seasons ago. Hansi leads, and it is a 2-horse race. 1100s first to second, Kim in third, but Kim, Friedrich, Hall, Del Duca, that's the 4-way battle for bronze. You can't imagine unless Lochner or Amor wreck it that you're going to catch them. And behind, yeah, everybody is chasing everybody. Look, 910s back, 92, 9300s, 11, 13, 8. I mean, it's just intensely close all the way down to the bottom of the top 20. And those 20 sleds will go in reverse order in the second heat. The final run of the 2-man World Cup at 15:30 Central European, 14:30 GMT, 09:30 Eastern. And that is in just under 45 minutes from now. We'll see you then. Bye for now.